Hi everyone, welcome to the ASUS Graphics channel. Today we have a very special stream for you guys. We are going to be talking about the newly launched RTX 4070 series. Hopefully you guys are all super hyped, and JJ's here as well, of course, our star for the streams.
Happy to be here. Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a really exciting day. Of course, yesterday was the kind of formal announcement, the launch for, I think, the long-awaited, right, RTX 4070, which I think is really a great option for those that are finally looking to maybe be upgrading to a very performant-based graphics card that's going to offer a great 1080p high refresh rate gaming experience, definitely a very strong 1440p gaming experience, and actually even offer, I think, a pretty impressive level of 4K. And then you add in a lot of the other cool stuff that we've got, whether it's going to be RTX, AV1, right? A lot of the other cool technology that's baked in here. And I think you're going to get a really great card. Plus, for those that have wanted something that's going to be smaller, I think a lot of people are going to really be happy. And I think to help you be able to talk about this and be able to provide a little bit more context and some of the really cool things that NVIDIA is doing for this generation, we've actually got another member here to join us for the stream with actually Michael joining us from NVIDIA. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Michael?
Hey, Jake and JJ, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic to have you.
Yeah, of course. Hey, my name is Mike Wilding. I am a senior account manager for NVIDIA. So I work with a lot of our system integrators, and I also do technical marketing for you guys.
Fantastic. Well, I think, nobody wants to know too much about what we're doing. I think most people are probably interested in terms of some of the cool stuff that's happening, of course, in terms of the graphics cards, what we're going to be doing in terms of the features, the functions, the design, how they differentiate themselves. And we're also going to try to give you guys just a little bit more perspective, I think, at maybe the more kind of complete picture in terms of some of the cool things that are present on the 4070. I know for a lot of us, when I'm talking to users in the community, when we're looking at what you want to jump to when it comes to a graphics card, a lot of times people are always looking at things, I think, from one generation to another generation, right? And the 30 series was a really performant, really great series of cards, right? From, whether you're talking a 3090 to a 3060, right? Or even refreshes with models that got like GDDR6, where original models had GDDR6, right? There's still going to be the reality that for most users, they don't actually upgrade gen to gen, right? Most users actually upgrade, sometimes 3, 4, 5 years apart, right? So it's really common that we can see users that are sitting in that landscape that they might have a system, they're enjoying that system, and maybe they're still on 1080p monitor. They haven't yet upgraded to that 1440p monitor, or maybe they just upgraded to a 4K panel, right? Or maybe they're in that transition of doing something. And that's when we generally see a lot of users that start considering that point of adoption. So maybe they're coming from something like a 1070, and now they're interested in making that jump to a 4070, right? Maybe
Absolutely.
they could be actually coming from a different GPU, or or maybe they have a pre-built system and they're looking to add in a graphics card, right? There's a lot of other scenarios that exist outside of this pure kind of gen-to-gen conversation, where I think gen-to-gen, we also tend to see that a little bit more on the higher end side of the side, right? Where users are always looking for that cutting edge of the performance.
Correct.
So, Jake, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of primer? What graphics card series are we actually going to be talking about specifically for this stream?
So specifically for this one, we have just launched our dual series in both white and black, which I'm really stoked for. JJ knows I'm a big fan of the white series cards and that aesthetic. We also just launched the TUF Gaming, and soon we'll also be launching the STRIX 4070 as well. So we're gonna have a little bit of a diverse lineup for this series.
Yeah, and so for
And
reference,
then
for those of you that might not be aware, before we kind of get into some of the specifics here on the GeForce RTX 4070, to give you some context in terms of the ASUS landscape, we of course have been a long-time NVIDIA partner. We have a really deep ecosystem when it comes to the cards. So you can see right here, kind of in our flagship, the best of the best we're going to have is going to be with our ROG STRIX series of graphics cards, which would comprise cards, of course, like your 4090, your 4080, 4070 Ti based models. We also have white variants for the 4080 and for the 4090. TUF Gaming series, of course, is fairly new. Some of you may not be familiar, but that has now been around for a couple of generations. You also get pretty similar GPU alignment there with the ROG STRIX series. So usually if there's a 4090, there's also going to be a 4090 TUF Gaming. And there's some other differences. If you want to find out about those, feel free. You can go ahead and ask us here. We'll maybe talk a little bit about that, but we also have some other streams that you guys can check out. A recent introduction that a lot of people are really excited about was the Noctua. So Noctua is a more limited edition kind of collaboration where we might not offer it for every single model, but it is a model that we do have within our lineup. And as Jake noted here, we now have our dual series. Now, this has been around for a few generations as well, but especially with this refresh, we now have a brand new 40 series dual where just literally before yesterday's launch, we only had 3060 class or higher dual cards. KO is right now still limited to the 30 series generation. Phoenix as well as 30 series generation. As well as going down to maybe more entry-level SKUs like 20 series or 16 series based GPUs. And then lastly, we have our ASUS standard cards, which might go down to your most entry-level GPUs, but very good kind of maybe turnkey type of options, right? So something if you're looking for like a quad HDMI single slot passive card, hey, you're going to be good to go there. So that gives you guys just a little bit of a quick recap in terms of the total SKU lineup. So what do we got first up, Jake? I think maybe a question, just move a little bit away is, maybe what's everybody playing?
I think that's excellent. And on that note, there's been a lot of cool stuff also coming out soon. So not just what are you playing, but what are you about to drop everything for to start playing?
You want me to go first, or you guys?
Yeah. You're the guest, Michael. So why don't you go ahead? Why don't you let us know what you're going with first?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, I jumped on Diablo 4 beta. I jumped on that weekend as soon as I could and played as much as I could with the little time I had. And then also I have kids, right? So my kids are getting into PC gaming, and I'm spending more time playing with them. And we just finished up Valheim, the Mistlands expansion, and then I'm also playing some Beam NG with my other child. So we're keeping busy there. It's a good experience, gaming with kids and kind of introducing them to PC gaming and start that next generation of PC gamers.
Awesome. For me, I'm a big, anybody that's watched the streams knows that, my favorite genres, RTS, action, RPG, racing, and I definitely like single player driven type of campaigns, whether it's first person or anything else. I would definitely agree. I really actually hyped for Diablo. I've been loving Forza, and I'm really, of course, just been super excited about, of course, the recent expansion that we've got in terms of Forza. I'm a huge 40K fan, so I'm actually love the stuff Fat Shark has been doing in terms of the updates, and plus it of course benefits from some of the latest NV tech in terms of the game engine with Dark Tide, also Total War. So those are kind of two different but exciting there too. I'm also a really big indie guy, so there's some cool stuff that I've been taking a look at, like Sea of Stars, some other games that I'm actually really excited about. So I'm a little bit of a completionist as well, so I try to jump into games that I know that I can commit and kind of want to follow through on. So I try not to take on too many because I want to actually go through the gameplay experience and enjoy it before I move over to something else. Because I'm sure a lot of us, I want to see in the chat how many people have games that they have in their library that they haven't even touched at all, but they bought them, right?
I want to talk about that.
How many people answer in terms of the positive in that side? Jake, what about you?
I don't even want to talk about the backlog, and somehow I still can't seem to stop buying games when I'm like, oh, that's a good sell. That'll be great for when I get around to playing it in 5 years. So I'm definitely really hyped as well for Diablo 4. I've come off Diablo 1 and 2 with friends, played 3 with friends a little bit as well, and I'm like very stoked for that. But there are a few titles that I'm also curious to try out as well. So fun fact, I've actually not played Cyberpunk at all. And so now with RT Overdrive, I'm really curious about testing that out, especially since it's come quite a long way since launch. And then, Michael, I know you and I've talked about it as well, but both Bethesda fans. And so I'm actually curious to see more about Redfall, because generally it's just been like, is it Elder Scrolls or Fallout? And if it's not, then I'm like, whatever. So I'm actually curious to maybe give that more of a shot as well. And maybe diversify a little bit.
Yeah, the dev team also behind Redfall, I know we covered in a recent GCS team, is actually a really, I think, exciting dev team. There's some really cool kind of components. I'm always a fan too, because I'm not as heavy in terms of wanting to play competitively. So anytime that there's like a co-op experience that, maybe you can reach out to a friend or somebody in the community and it's just you guys enjoying the experience together, like you noted, Michael, being able to play with your kids too, that's also kind of a fun just experience, right? Where it's it's that cooperative experience as opposed to a competitive experience, which is pretty cool. So some cool fun games, and of course to be able to play these games, we need, of course, graphics cards. That is what makes it all happen, taking care of those pixels. So before we jump into that, I just want to go ahead and just thank everybody for joining us so far on the stream. Give a little bit of shout out to some people that we have right here. So we've got Jose joining us on the stream. Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. We've got Idle Squirrel saying, would love to have one of these. I would definitely agree. I think these cards are looking fantastic. We've got Caesar joining us as well, Living with Perks, and a Garth 415 also. So thank you guys, and everybody else that's joining us here on the stream. Thank you for having us. All right, Jake, let's go ahead and kick it off. What do we got first?
Awesome. So I guess let's jump right into it. So again, I think everybody here knows by now that RTX 40 launched yesterday, and we started with our dual series cards. So as JJ mentioned, the dual series is definitely not new to us, but it is new for our 40 series and for the kind of 70 tier models. So this is probably one of the most exciting launches to me because I've actually been a fan of the Prime styling, especially since it's taken on this kind of more like space type design language with the new Z70 boards. And I think Z690 had it as well, JJ.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, we've had now Prime because of that space kind of theme design for now a couple of generations. And here, if we take a closer look actually at the white edition, I know a lot of people really like the fact that we've been expanding the white ecosystem. And here you can kind of see it paired together with one of our Prime series motherboards. It has a really complementary aesthetic, you know. And I like to always show the cards in a couple of different orientations. Here, we're taking a look at it not only the horizontal but also in the vertical. Horizontal based mounting is still by far the kind of the most standardized mounting configuration. It's the easiest, less concerns as far as riser cables or fitment issues, things pressing up against the side of a panel or anything along those lines. But it's really almost never going to be an issue with any of these cards because a big thing that you're seeing here is inherently within the name. The dual series is bringing about a very compact based design. So when we're definitely looking at a lot of the higher end graphics cards in the lineup, you're getting outstanding performance, right? You're getting really cool temperatures, really good acoustics, great boosting clock performance as well. But you're also going to be looking at cards that could be upwards of, you know, 325, 330 plus millimeters. So you're talking about definitely much longer cards. The great thing is here is with something like the dual series, it doesn't matter whether you're going ATX, whether you're going micro ATX, whether you're going SFF, you know, true, like even, you know, 12-liter type small form factor builds, you're going to be able to take one of these cards and put those in there. And I think before we dive too much into maybe some of those elements in the dual, I know, Michael, you know, we were talking a little bit yesterday about maybe giving a little bit of context to, let's give a little bit of an update, especially when we're talking about people making kind of that jump from maybe an older generation. What might be some of the things that are going to be, I think, really important within, I'd say, the NVIDIA kind of design, right, that users are going to be benefiting from, right? I think for sure we know, hey, we've got 8 Lovelace, right? We've got that architecture. Every architecture brings about performance improvements, right? So we have like new, of course, core architecture making enhancements to RTX gaming performance, right? We, of course, have new optical flow accelerator, right? Which is doing some cool stuff with like DLSS 3. We've got things that are holdover, like NVIDIA reflex technology. Can you give some insight into some things that we might want to be a little bit more mindful of?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, this product is certainly tied or targeted to folks that are, you know, sitting on our 10 series and 20 series of products, right? You know, they're going to expect a large performance uplift, whether it be through traditional means like rasterization or through our new feature technology DLSS 3, right? And so I think for me personally, it's obvious that AI is becoming, you know, center stage when it comes to gaming. And with the inclusion of DLSS super resolution, formerly known as DLSS 2, and DLSS 3, right, people are going to just be able to experience gaming really at levels that we couldn't really get to with brute force rendering, right? We're really bringing this into the fray. And I think with the recent announcement of the Cyberpunk Overdrive preview, people are really getting a glimpse into the future. And I think if it wasn't for these technologies such as DLSS 3, this type of glimpse into the future wouldn't really be possible or even playable. Right.
Yeah, I think that's the exciting thing, right? You know, I like to talk to users when we're kind of engaging the community is merits behind how they might sometimes look at these features. And I ultimately just go is like, think about it just like tools on your proverbial tool belt, right? Absolutely. You as a gamer, right? You essentially are just giving yourself more flexibility to turn on more knobs or switches to be able to ultimately enjoy the gameplay experience, right? So for me as a gamer, if you're telling me that right now I can buy this card and all of a sudden flip on a knob and a switch, right, where I can jump and be able to enjoy something like RTX, right, at playable frame rates, you know, in something even like Cyberpunk, which is, it's pretty crazy, right? Because normally you would think of something like a tech preview, because it's not even technically a game release, right? It's a tech preview.
Right, yeah.
that would be maybe more limited to being like, okay, I'm only going to be able to play that on something like a 4090, but I'm actually able to legitimately play it at a good smooth frame rate on a card like a 4070, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the 4070, you know, specifically in that preview, in the overdrive preview, you know, at 1440p with DLSS 3 enabled, you know, you can expect anywhere to fit 50 to 60, a little more than 60 FPS in that title. So you can play it and have a good experience and get to really get to see all that visual eye candy at the same time. I mean, we're talking about, you know, full ray tracing. There's no rasterized lighting, right? It is all fully path traced. So it's really a huge step forward, you know, for rendering as a whole.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you guys really recently released some interesting information, because I know that there's definitely kind of some conversation that happens out there amongst, you know, individuals in the community in different spaces. But I think, you know, one of the cool things you guys have now had for multiple generations, really for a long time, is, of course, the GeForce experience. And then that you guys can actually kind of see, I think, a good amount of information when it comes to the user experience and kind of what they're doing with their systems, right?
Yeah.
And I think you had kind of an interesting kind of slide here, right? Which we've also seen affirmed by the community when people actually get to try the features out, right? Like when they actually go in and they try something like Ansel, or they try something like Shadowplay, or they try RTX, or they try NVIDIA Reflex, there is definitely that difference between sometimes, you know, just reading about it or seeing something and then all of a sudden going, I get it, you know, that experience benefit, right? I mirror this a lot too when, you know, we first started seeing, you know, G-Sync when it first came to market. It was one of those things you could read about it, you could see about it, but until you essentially had a situation where you didn't get any more tearing, right? And you would just be able to enjoy a smooth, you know, less stuttery type of experience when it came to gaming. It was just something that you almost had to try for the first time, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you want, I can go ahead and share this slide to kind of give you what you're talking about.
Yeah, please do.
You guys can see it.
And Kevin also had a comment as well about calling it DLSS frame generation instead. But one thing I should point out here is that DLSS 3 incorporates more than just what would previously be thought of as DLSS technology. It does also include reflex and things like that as well.
Correct.
So it's a bit more comprehensive than just the frame generation. And that's part of it being a new generation and not just that additional add-on of that specific tech.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point, you know, DLSS 3 is an accumulation, to your point, of 3 technologies, right? So you mentioned, you know, DLSS Super Resolution, which, you know, has been out for quite some time. It includes the frame generation component, which, you know, obviously utilizes the optical flow accelerator, JJ's point. And in this generation of graphics cards, we have a really performant optical flow accelerator, so it makes frame generation possible. And then we add reflex, right? Because, you know, this is the frame generation component is a post-processing technique, so we need to be able to kind of claw back some of that additional, you know, loss of latency. And so it's really
claw back, and I think even maximize, right? Because the thing is that sometimes, right, we can clearly see that when NVIDIA Reflex is implemented, right, independently by itself, you can have significant savings in terms of that total system latency experience, right? And so I think that you're clawing back, like you said, but at the same time, I think you're also helping to maximize the efficiency of that kind of that total kind of pipeline, right? That's
true.
Occurring.
That's true. Yeah. So you know, and I actually have a graph or a slide I'd like to kind of go over here in a little bit. It kind of shows, you know, how DLSS 3 affects certain scenarios, right? Where if you're GPU bound or if you're CPU bound, you know, kind of what to expect. But, you know, if you want, I can kind of talk to this slide real quick. Are you guys able to see everything?
Yeah, I think this is great. Yeah,
great.
So let us know what we got in here.
So, you know, it's no surprise to everyone that, you know, back in 2018 with our launch of the 20 series product, we introduced the world to our first generation of RTX products, right? So this included ray tracing and our first generation of DLSS. And, you know, we took a snapshot back in 2018. And we took a total of 4 games. And we really wanted to see how many gamers are using this technology. Now, this is emerging technology. So I think, you know, it's only obvious for us to kind of wait and see how things pan out. But, you know, we were really committed to this technology. But still, you know, we had about a third of gamers using this technology back in 2018 when it was introduced. Now, if we fast forward to today, in 2023, we took a snapshot of how many gamers on 40 series are utilizing both of these technologies. And, you know, and on average, it's around 80% for both technologies. So both RT and DLSS, it's a huge amount of people that are utilizing these technologies. You know, and now instead of just having those 4 games back in 2018, now we have over 400 games and applications that actually utilize our hardware and utilize this platform. So it's really
And
incredible.
in a pretty short time frame. I think, you know, that also speaks to,
It really
of course,
is. Yeah.
you know, in NVIDIA's, of course, tight integration, right, within, you know, partner development, right, ISVs, right, in terms of you guys being able to launch these initiatives, be able to fund them and support them and work really closely at, you know, releasing, you know, SDKs and working with those partners to be able to integrate these things seamlessly. And I think that's something that we definitely saw with, of course, DLSS, right, whereas
Absolutely.
you guys really helped to see, like, you know, a lot of people I think initially was like, it's going to take years before we start to get, and literally was like every week there was like another game that was dropping, another game that was dropping, there was another game that was dropping. And that's even happening right now, even from the 40 series launch, right, with DLSS 3, the number of games where we started off with, where it was like, you know, it was like, okay, we've got this one example, we got two examples, and now we're, you know, close to what, you know, about 30 titles or so.
Yeah, there's about, you know, with DLSS 3, there's about 35 plus titles right now. I think 50 that have been announced that are supporting DLSS 3. So at the current trajectory, we're you know, it's the growth rate is about 7x over DLSS 2 as far as the adoption rate, right? So
that to me is, you know, pretty insane, right? When you take a look at that, you know, because at the end of the day, right, you know, we want to have technologies, but we want to be able to actually realistically benefit them and enjoy them. And I think that's the great thing, is you guys have been spending that time and effort to be able to see this realized in things that, you know, current titles that we know people want to jump into and actually play. And then also, of course, closely working with those kind of leading titles where we know people are going to be really excited about them, right? Where it's like you said, an announcement for something like Diablo 4, we know we're going to be getting, you know, even enhanced performance, or what's been done with Cyberpunk, right? Or so many other titles. So I think that's pretty cool in that regard. And
kind of back to your point, as far as ease of integration, right? I think it's, you know, we've been making it as easy as possible for devs to integrate these technologies into the game engines, right? So we have plugins for Unreal Engine, we have plugins for other game engines out there. I think we just announced that we have a plugin for Unreal 5.2. And then for game engines that don't have plugins, we have our Streamline framework, right? Which actually makes it easier to implement additional technologies. So, you know, we're trying to make the ease of integration, you know, the best we can, and it's only getting better. And so it's really exciting to see this type of adoption for, you know, these amazing technologies.
Very, very cool. So I think, you know, moving on to the little next point here is, why don't you give us a little bit of context right here? So there is, I think, some cool things that have been done in terms that not necessarily everybody might be aware of. I think some of the media engine components, right, that are present within a graphics card. And so for those of you kind of watching the stream, it's like, what's a media engine? You know, holistically, when you take a look at a graphics card, there's so much that it's doing now, right? It's not just, of course, providing you your game experience, right? A lot of times it's that default, of course, piece of hardware that's providing your acceleration experience for, you know, video content that you're going to be seeing on screen. And so the media engine has a big influence on this in terms of what it can decode. And so NVIDIA has really kind of been a leader in this space for a long time in terms of offering support for usually latest specification standards. And so one of the really cool things, and we've covered in a recent ASUS graphics card stream, was, of course, the introduction of AV1, not only just decoding, which you had previously, but now encoding support, right? And the 4070, although it is a more mid-range paced product offering, right, you're getting both, right? You're getting AV1 encode and decode support, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And with the 4070, you are only getting one of the encodings for AV1 encoders, but it's still, you know, it's up to par, and it still does a fantastic job if you're into streaming. You know, it's about up to 40% more efficient compared to H.264. And I know that YouTube and will be supporting this technology very soon, you know, along with OBS.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, again, you guys can kind of take a look a little bit here, you know, from NVIDIA's kind of reference, right, in terms of H.264 to AV1, in terms of regardless of whether you're looking at 1080p, whether you're looking at 1440p, 2160, right, those efficiency improvements, they're quite notable. And there's also, of course, that quality enhancement, right, because you're just, again, talking about improvements in terms of how the actual container's working, and its efficiency and effectiveness in terms of what it's actually showing you, right, whether that's reduction in kind of small blurry elements, right, or just the overall sharpness and textural elements. Everything ultimately is going to look better. So it's kind of really the best of both worlds, because you're getting smaller file sizes, but you're actually getting improved image quality. So that's pretty sweet. On the other side too, you know, we've talked a bit about gaming, but I also think that this card might be really, I think, the sweet spot in a lot of ways for also, I think, the creator segmentation in the market. And one of the cool things you guys are doing, as well as you guys continue to offer support with the NVIDIA Studio Driver Suite. Can you give us a little bit of context behind maybe the NVIDIA Studio Driver Suite, and how that kind of might be beneficial to somebody that maybe is not gamer, but maybe, you know, somebody that's using Adobe Creative Cloud or DaVinci Resolve or Blender?
I get this question a lot, especially with my partners. There's some apprehension about the NVIDIA Studio driver, being in which, a lot of creators also game, right? So they're wondering, well, hey, do I need a game ready driver? Or do I need a studio driver? And the fact of the matter is that the studio driver still has game ready drivers baked into it, right? But there is a bit of a delay until we actually see updates for some of the newest games, right? So for instance, it's typically about a month or so of delay until you see those game ready updates on the studio side, because keep in mind, the whole purpose of the studio driver is really to get the most reliable experience you possibly can when you're utilizing over the 110 applications that can take advantage of of our RTX ecosystem, right? So some of the apps that you mentioned, all the Adobe Suite, Blender, I mean, there's just, like I said, there's over 110 applications that can take that can actually utilize the hardware within the GPU. It's not just about gaming anymore, right? There's so many things that can be done, whether it's be, live streaming or a graphic design. We're now seeing a huge influx of the text to art. That's becoming very popular as of late. And then AI editing, and the options are endless at this point. So it's really,
and even things that we don't necessarily know about, like I remember when Adobe, of course, worked with you guys, and he saw the introduction of things like the neural filters within Creative Cloud, right? And being able to all of a sudden make adjustments to maybe somebody wasn't smiling in the picture, and then all of a sudden now you can go through, and with those AI and those predictive models, and along with that other information, now you can just slide that, have that be GPU accelerated, and something that literally could have maybe taken minutes, maybe an hour, right? Now it's like literally, okay, it's going to happen in, a minute and a half, right? Which is crazy, just to be able to afford users, again, the flexibility. So you'll also see this as we start to talk a little bit now actually about our series here, whether we're talking about the Dual, the TUF Gaming, and the ROG STRIX model, is that, we've tried to offer you guys the flexibility to pick a graphics card based on kind of your use case scenario, your form factor consideration, even the verticality as far as, are you maybe building as opposed to upgrading, where we haven't touched on it, but the power requirements. And I think, Mike, you can probably show a pretty cool slide here, maybe talking a little bit about efficiency, but that's really, I think, one of the great things actually about Ada Lovelace in general is, right, its overall efficiency. For the performance you're getting from the cards, it's quite impressive in terms of the power. And even especially when we talk about like peak power, we talk about like transient response performance, things along those lines, the peak transients on 40 series is better than it was on 30 series. And so the cool thing that we get with that is that you don't have to be as kind of concerned, right? That you like, if I even have an older power supply, it's going to be pulling all this extra power, right?
Exactly.
Which I think is just, it's a nice plus point, right? So
absolutely.
Dual cards, for instance, are using the legacy PCIe power connectors, where if you really kind of want the latest and greatest, the ROG STRIX will have, of course, your 12-volt high power connector, right? Which is 16 pin. Giving you different options, right? But can you speak a little bit to that on the efficiency side?
Of course. So if you guys can see the slide here, as you guys have heard, with our previous launches with 4080, 4090, these are extremely power efficient GPUs. The Ada Lovelace architecture really steps it up, an additional bar when it comes to power consumption and price and performance per watt, realistically, right? So one of the things I wanted to highlight here is that when we look at average gaming power, even though the TGP of the GPU is set at 200 watts, we typically are seeing around 186 watts of usage during your average gaming session. Awesome. Not only are we seeing a reduction in wattage during gaming sessions, but we're also seeing reduction in wattage during video playback, and then also just when your GPU is idling. So if you were to compare this to the previous generations, you're seeing a large reduction in overall power consumption. And then the 4070, when we look at raster performance, it's pretty close to what we see on the RTX 3080, but the power consumption is almost half, right?
Yep.
It's a huge benefit to gamers now that we can see smaller form factor GPUs. To your point, some of your cards use a single 8-pin PEG connector, while some of the higher end models use a 16-pin. So it really is nice to have something for small form factor gamers, and then gamers that maybe want a more a smaller overall PC gaming experience.
Yeah, and so somebody's saying, so I don't need to update my PSU, and that's the great thing. Again, really kind of the community favorite for so many years was the 850 watt. I think we're finally to see that kind of move a little bit almost into lower pricing. Is starting to see the 1000 watts start to get a lot of favor. Even 1200 watts are getting a lot of favor. But the reality is there's a lot of people that've got that 650, 750, 850 watt, and this is really a great choice in terms of your graphics card that you can slot this in there and not have to worry about that the power consumption is going to be a factor. Right? It's just going to be performant, it's going to be efficient, And then I think this segues into really the value prop that we bring as an add-in board partner, right? Where we always try to, our internal kind of mantra that we try to advocate is, cooler, quieter, faster, and, really built to a great quality standard. So I think with that, let's talk a little bit, Jake, here. Let's go through the series, right? I think we said, right, we've got Dual, TUF, and ROG STRIX. Let's go ahead and break these models down. Do you want to tackle the Dual series first?
Absolutely. I think it's the best place to start. Again, not only am I absolutely hyped and pumped that we now have the Dual series and that it's updated to have kind of this like more prime styling aesthetic. As you showed in the slides earlier, I am thrilled with this design update. So yes, I would love to start here with this one.
Okay, yeah, so you guys can see we've got here a Dual. We're going to offer it in black. We're going to offer it in white. We are going to be in alignment with NVIDIA in terms of our target MSRP pricing here, so that's great. So you are going to be able to get this at a $599 price point. As we've historically offered, though, we do have essentially variants. So we will have an OC model and a standard model. That doesn't mean that overclocking is limited on either model, right? It's just the overclock model means that you get a factory overclock pre-validated by ASUS. So just a little bit faster boost clocks that are going to be present on there. If you're looking for, usually on average, it tends to be somewhere about maybe like 3 to 5 FPS bump. It depends on the game and a couple of factors like that. But you can, of course, load up, the GeForce experience if you want to manually tune your card, or you can, of course, jump into GPU Tweak to customize things like your power limit or customize things like your memory clock speed, your GPU boost clock speed, things along those lines. But, performance is great already out of the box. So this is going to be the black model. So we noted right here, it is going to be your standard current pre-existing PCI power connector that is going to be present on here. Very compact in terms of this is a 2.5 approximately slot-based card. So we consider that most of the higher-end cards were clearly over 3 slot, right? Going to 3.1, 3.25, some 3.5 slot-based cards, quite compact in terms of its overall footprint. And then here we've got the white variant as well. A nice note, if somebody's wondering as well, when it comes to the overall design implementation, all of these do feature a metal backplate, and the metal backplate does afford you also a little bit of thermal dissipation. There's actually thermal pads there. You'll find that actually some other cards on the market, they might just have a backplate, but they might not even have any thermal pads. There is no RGB lighting, though, on either one of these Dual cards. So it's really just a clean, refined. You don't have to worry about having any software. There's nothing to configure. Just drop it in, looks good, and you're going to be good to go. So if you're looking for kind of that turnkey simplicity, but there's still a nice stylized design element, it's going to be really nice in that respect. They do feature our Axial Tech, so Axial Tech based fans. So these have a new ring barrier design. So pretty much that just helps to focus airflow into the heatsink assembly. It gives us overall better temperature performance in kind of real world gaming scenarios. You're going to really see these cards actually operating quite effectively when it comes to thermal temperatures. On average, you're going to be looking at probably the high 50s, so like 58, 59, 60, 61, 62C. Very cool card in terms of its temperature, and acoustics are outstanding. Now, there's always a little bit of an interesting, situation comes up, on how we compare our cards to, of course, your guys' FE-based cards, but we'll tip our hat a little bit here and say that we're actually not only just a little bit cooler, but we're also even quieter than the FE card. So that's pretty impressive, with the Dual being a very compact-based solution. Is you get a cool, quiet card, and it looks great. Jake, any thoughts that you want to impart here in terms of the Dual card?
Not just for the Dual card. I do actually want to answer one of the questions that we had. So what is one of the main advantages and benefits of ASUS? And like, I can sit here all day long and harp on just how nice the cards look and how much I love it. But at the end of the day, aesthetics will always be at least somewhat subjective. And we can talk that, we're at MSRP and that we offer excellent cooling performance. But I think, JJ, you have something that you've been a big proponent of is our Auto Extreme tech, correct?
Yeah, so we do quite a number of different things. I think, ASUS has really been known to be a company that we have a very high commitment to quality, performance, and innovation. So, we were actually the first manufacturer that unilaterally moved to full SMT production across all of our graphics cards. So not only from, highest end based graphics cards, but literally to the most entry level of our series. And so it's great that regardless of which card you're looking at in our lineup, whether you want to buy this brand new 4070, maybe you want to get a 4070 Ti, or you want to get 4090, they're all built to this. But Auto Extreme stream, it's not just about the production process. There's a lot of things that go in, from the component selection to the advanced optical analysis that we do in terms of making sure that the boards are produced to a very high degree, to actually the elimination of things actually like a secondary solder, which helps to maximize actually PCB quality. It's actually more also environmentally friendly. There's a lot of elements that we essentially have behind the scenes that we go into. And even when we actually look at the card itself, there's going to be subtle details. Those Axial Tech fans, they feature dual ball bearings. Sometimes you're going to see on some other basic designs, they might have maybe a standard ball bearing design, or it could have a sleeve bearing. There could be a difference in that. Power delivery also. Power delivery is already quite performant and capable on the FE model, but even for the dual series, you'll actually see that we feature even a higher performing VRM assembly that will be on there. And on the TUF Gaming, it even takes it further. We're not only a higher end VRM assembly, but we're also going to have benefits in terms of even higher rated capacitors, right? And there are also subtle elements as well. There's going to be items like the IO shield, right? So the IO bracket, not IO shield, but if we again take a look here at the card, some people might be surprised. So an example might here is, when you think about this, we're one of the only manufacturers that actually uses full 304 grade stainless steel. And you're going to go, well, what's the difference there? One, it's actually a bit more rigid, which helps to keep the card even more stable when it's like installed inside your system. But depending on the climate or in the space you might be, if you have more ambient humidity, things are a little bit kind of more moist in the air, you can actually get oxidation. Take for instance, and that can actually weaken that material, and also aesthetically it doesn't look as nice, right? So it's just a premium touch point. But details large and small, I think when we look at also at the TUF Gaming model, we'll kind of show you also some of those other kind of upgrades that you get when you buy an ASUS card. But I think the big focus is that, you know, when there's that consistency in production and, you know, commitment to definitely make sure that you're getting a great reliable card.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that touches on one of the main benefits. Again, you can see from reviews and stuff all day long about the temps and the performance and everything else that we offer. Things like overclocking capabilities that we may have, especially for the OC models. And we can harp on and on about that all day, but I think that's one of the most unique features, that we put a lot of time and effort into the quality of the product as well, and not just does it make frames quickly at a somewhat okay like temp. So
yeah, and I think the important thing too is I try to look at this actually a little bit to what Michael was speaking to when you talk about development and kind of a strong ecosystem that you as a company help to facilitate, right? So it's easy kind of per generation sometimes to add stuff in, right? It's much harder to create a full framework of support and kind of an infrastructure to be able to produce something. So from our end, to be able to develop an entire backend system, to be able to produce the cards, to be able to inspect the cards, to then go through the actual material component selection that we're doing, that's actually quite a bit more of an investment for a company to execute than it is to just, per that new generation, change the ID design, you know, add a color, you know, tweak this, maybe add a different fan, or maybe put a little bit more lighting on it. That's actually not that complicated. But to go back and say, hey, you want to change your entire production process to elevate the quality, that's actually quite a bit more investment. Just in where I give it a lot of credit to NVIDIA, right? Where to make those investments to be able to facilitate things like the deep learning network that they have to have in the back end that does all this machine modeling, right? And I think this has even evolved, right? Your guys is in terms of what you guys done in terms of the frame modeling on the systems, right? These are systems that not only you guys have to maintain, but you have to upgrade, right? Because you want to be in alignment to be able to unlock performance, right? And be able to realize even higher fidelity, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I think, you know, I'm not privy to a lot of that information, to be honest, but you know, I think it's, you know, the proof is in the pudding when we look at DLSS as a whole, right? We've been through multiple generations of DLSS 2, and you can see with every update, significant updates,
it gets better.
Yeah, significant advantages are made, right? So it's, you know, DLSS, I think we're at I think it's 3.1 right now as far as the super resolution technology, and so it's made huge strides, and it's not something that we're going to stop, you know, working on, right? Even though DLSS 3 is, you know, top and center right now, or front and center right now, it also includes super resolution, right? So we're going to continuously making updates to that. So it's definitely part of the story.
And there's also that, that wider and deeper narrative too, right? And I think that's the other thing too, is you have to look at that you guys got so many buckets in terms of what you're also working on when you're talking about the GPU and all the kind of underlying support, right? Where it's like, hey, we've got that media engine, we've got things like the shadow play, we've got the Ansel, we've got, RTX voice, we've got the broadcast based features,
Exactly.
right? We've got this noise suppression, we've got super resolution, even like older things, which are really interesting. Like, was it, you guys relabeled it, DLDSR, right? So dynamic super resolution, right? Which actually for me, I remember when that first got introduced, I was like, this makes a lot of sense, because I was like, render the game at a higher resolution, even though I have a lower display. And I was like, this was great for especially older titles. I was like, okay, I'm rendering this at 4K, but I've only got a 1080p screen, but it's going to look sharper. It's going to look clearer. And actually, even with the new updates you guys did, it's still actually a great other technology where it seems like it's similar to, of course, something like DLSS, but it's actually quite different. It's just, again, another option in the toolbox, right? Do you want to try this out, or do you want to try this out, right?
Yeah, and we've added also DLAA, right, which is a form of super resolution, but instead of starting at a lower resolution, we actually start at the native resolution and improve from there, right? So if you even want the best image quality using deep learning, that's your option.
There you go. There you go. Jake, so going from the dual series, why don't we go into the TUF gaming series?
Well, actually, before we do that, we've got two things we need to do. First, someone's actually asking about seeing like a close-up of these, and I can, show you right here a little bit of a close-up of the card. But if you want to see something that's a little bit nicer quality, we actually have done an unboxing of the black card already. I will link that in the chat for anybody who wants to check that out as well, and gives a little bit more of an overview of the cards as well. And then in addition to that, we need to go ahead and do the first code that we're going to have for this stream. So if everybody's not aware yet, we are doing a giveaway. And that's going to be for one of the white models of the dual that we've actually shown off so far. So this is going to be your first secret code.
So for this card, right? For the dual white, is that right? Somebody's actually going to be able to win this? That's sweet.
Good looking card.
Yeah, somebody will actually be able to win that. So guys, if you haven't already, make sure that you get in on this. I'll link that in the chat as well in just a moment. But yes, this is your chance to actually win one of these and get some cool features talking about, like history and better power efficiency and ray tracing, and go play Cyberpunk RT Overdrive and all the other fun stuff. So
very cool. All right, and I did actually also see one of the comments here that I just wanted to kind of note on before we get into that TUF gaming model. Somebody was actually talking about kind of performance. Somebody was actually talking about. I want to go ahead and let kind of the users know we do actually have our GPU tweak graphics card utility. So we actually went through a really extensive long-term beta in terms of actually the development for it. It was over a year and a half, and so we do have our GPU tweak 3. This has a full OSD menu in there if you want to see your live overlaid stats. Although that is something you can also do within the GeForce experience. Some really nice things that I like, though, that we have that's really unique to GPU Tweak 3, I would say be two specific things. One is that we have a really intelligent voltage frequency curve tuning mechanism that I think simplifies it, makes it a little bit easier for people, although you still have the same type of option where you have the scanning implementation. But this little guy right here is actually pretty cool. This is actually what we call our app profiling based implementation. The app profiling implementation will allow you to essentially match clock profiles and fan profiles to a specific application. Now you might go, well, why would I want to do that? Well, the thing about it is, if let's say you have maybe an overclock configuration that you set up and you have maybe running for Forza, for Cyberpunk, or for Diablo, Company Heroes, whatever you might be playing, right? Do you want to have that when you're maybe opening your web browser or checking email or looking at a photo? Maybe not, because from an efficiency standpoint, from a power consumption standpoint, it makes more sense. Just revert the card back to stock. And so the great thing is you can do that. Also, some games respond differently. Some games actually might benefit a little bit more from maybe having your memory pushed a little bit more, right? And some other games sometimes can be a little bit more boost clock sensitive, and maybe you adjusting that power target and adjusting the boost clock and increasing it will even give you a little bit more performance. The cool thing is ultimately, though, you can dial this in. And also, even from an overclocking perspective, do keep in mind, guys, different games will react differently to different overclocks. Some games will hit the card a bit more heavy. So like if you jump into like a Quake RTX, take for instance, it's an absolute monster. It will hit that card super, super hard, just like I'm sure actually the Cyberpunk would, because you're doing so much extra work. Where if you jump into, I don't know, I love Ori and the Blind Forest, but if I jump into it, it's probably not going to be hitting my GPU that hard. Okay. So that is a benefit too, is that you might be able to tweak your parameters. And so you can do that. Another really thing that I like there is actually our importing and exporting and side-by-side profile option for monitoring. So you can actually log your system, and then you can export it, and then you can import it, and you could put it side by side. So if anybody's ever done any performance tuning and monitoring, they know what you usually do is you take these screenshots, or you open up Notepad, and then you start to put things side by side, or you create your own little spreadsheet. You don't need to do that here. Just literally take the two files, go import, and you can now look at them side by side. So I can also see, okay, hey, my temps rose up here, or my clock frequency was consistently now a little bit higher than this. So it makes looking at the data much, much easier, much more friendly. So that is GPU Tweak 3, and it works across all of our NVIDIA-based graphics cards, new and old. So if you got an ASUS 10 series card, you got an ASUS 9 series card. Hey, you should consider upgrading, but GPU Tweak is going to work for you, so no worries on that side. Jake, why don't we take a closer look here at the TUF gaming graphics card?
Absolutely. I think it's a perfect time to start talking about this one.
Oh yeah, so why don't you go ahead and just give us one more shot of that right there, Jake, before I go ahead and show the image there.
So for
yeah,
those
you guys
of you who have
looking really, really nice. You guys will see some nice subtle elements there. We actually have a ribbing brace design, which also helps to stabilize the card because it's even, of course, a bigger. One of the things that it's going to be hard to see in the visual, but Jake, hopefully you can speak to it, especially because you're touching both. Do you guys remember one of the key differences between Dual and TUF Gaming is on the Dual model, it's a plastic shroud with a metal backplate, but on the TUF Gaming graphics card, it's metal. So you get that nice kind of premium. Technically from a performance standpoint, there's not really going to be a difference between the two, and they both look really good in terms of, I think, the aesthetic. But if you appreciate that next level kind of premiumness, that is a nice element that you're going to get on the TUF Gaming card. Is you're going to get the metal shroud and you're going to get the metal backplate. And this card, just like the Dual model, will also have thermal pads on that backplate as well. So all the way across the board, you're going to get essentially a bigger heatsink assembly. You're going to get quite a number of points, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But Jake, do we have pricing for the TUF Gaming 47 series?
We do. It's actually already available in Newegg as well. I've linked both of the cards that are available in the chat, but the TUF starts at $679. So not bad at all. One thing I do want to touch on real quick is that for the TUF and Dual, I don't know how easily it'll be able to be seen, but these are using the standard 8-pin versus the newer 16-pin, 12V pin.
Yeah, so the 12-volt hot power connector. So again, here, seamless kind of upgrade path, right? If you've got essentially any of your standard ATX 2 series based power supplies, so 2.3, 2.4, hey, plug and play ready, right? As long as you meet that wattage and amperage requirement, drop it in, you're good to go, and you're set. So very, very simple. No concerns.
We had a quick question about Armory Crate as well, what it can do as far as control, I guess, for the graphics cards we have.
Yeah, so this card, of course, does feature integrated RGB lighting. So it will, of course, fully offer ASUS Aura Sync support. So that means if you pair it up like system here that you see next to me, or if you were to pair this with like a TUF Gaming motherboard that has lighting, and then you add in your RGB memory, of course, your AIO, any of those things, as long as they're within the ASUS Aura ecosystem, they're entirely interoperable in that regard. So you just go in, you can go ahead and enable your lighting, and you're good to go. And speaking, I think, of lighting, this is an area that we can go ahead and touch on some of the actual differences in terms of what do you get coming from the Dual card to the TUF Gaming card, right? Now, again, I think we definitely don't want to undersell the value of the Dual card. It's going to be a fantastic choice. Again, we already talked about the thermals, and we talked about the acoustic properties and its compact nature. So you can see you're not compromising on this card being cool, quiet, or performant, right? That's going to be a given. Again, this is just that premium upgrade that if you're looking for, again, even faster clocks, a couple other points, that's what you're going to be getting. So let's go ahead and take a look in here and see what are going to be some of these differences. So if we compare the Dual to the TUF Gaming, one is going to be RGB lighting. Remember, the Dual does not feature any RGB lighting. On TUF Gaming, you will feature 2 RGB lighting zones. So you have that one little accent strip that's there if you may be going for that trend of vertical mounting, but there's also a little bit of that TUF Gaming logo, which is on the horizontal side. So in either orientation, you're going to have some visible RGB lighting. Okay, higher program clock speed. Now, by default, of course, all these cards meet that minimum requirement of what NVIDIA defines for, of course, their minimum, right? But this will come with a little bit of a higher programmed factory clock speed. So again, that's just going to give you a couple of extra frames. It's just a little bit of a boost in terms of performance. I do want to note, we didn't touch on it for the dual card, but again, you know, from a partner perspective, I think that we're adding a great deal of value. We actually are pretty much matching the same maximum power limit that the FE model will offer on the 4070, which is 220 watt approximately in terms of the max power limit. The default, I believe, Michael's 200, right, in terms of the default power limit.
Correct.
Yep. There will actually be other cards out there that don't necessarily even allow for that higher limit. So we will offer essentially the maximum of what you would hopefully be able to want in terms of availability there. A larger, more performant thermal solution. And so what we mean by there is just it's bigger, right? It's more mass, right? It's a bigger card. You go from 4 heat pipes to a 6 heat pipe and triple fans. What does that equate to? It means that you can keep just lower consistent temperatures. So if you want to even be able to have a quieter and cooler system, this could be beneficial. Maybe you've got a hotter ambient environment. I'm in Northern California, and in the summers here, I can tell you where I'm at. We can hit 110, 115, 118 degrees. It can get pretty warm. And even when I have AC, my ambient temperature raises up. So maybe I want a card that gives me just a little bit more thermal headroom, right? A premium design element, right? Again, plastic shroud here, metal shroud. Both have metal backplates and both have thermal pads on the backplate. And then the VRM design. VRM design is already actually upgraded on the Dual, but on the TUF Gaming, it even goes to a higher. This should be actually, I believe, a 10 power phase based design. 20K rated capacitors is quite a bit higher than most cards you're going to see are probably going to be 5K rated capacitors, and overall higher operating spec. So quite a number of upgrades that you get by going over to the TUF Gaming model. And again, if you're asking like what might be the thermal kind of ballpark, I would say little bit actually lower, probably about 2 to 3 degrees, maybe lower than even the Dual model. And keep in mind that's impressive because it's actually even running at higher speeds, right? So you're even getting, again, those lower temperatures. But, you know, realistically, what that looks like in gaming depends on the game engine. But I would say, you know, probably mid 50s to very low 60s in terms of your overall temperature target. So again, very much taking advantage of the efficiency and the performance, but keeping it cool and keeping it quiet. So looking at those two cards, Michael, do you have a preference? Which one would you be, Team Dual or would you be Team TUF Gaming?
Well, I think I would personally probably reach for the Dual, to be honest. I like the size. I think it would fit nicely in a small form factor build.
Yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, definitely, yeah. You know, because you do go to it's still quite a bit smaller, right? So that card will still fit, I think, even in compact what are called like, you know, mid towers, right? Or compact ATX based chassis. But for sure, if we go with something like the, you know, the Dual is going to be really, really tiny, right? So, you know, again, you could go down to something like our AP201 micro ATX board, have this really nice compact tight system, and it's going to work great, right? Yeah. So yeah. It's a tough argument. And also you're not compromising. You're already that's a card that's really cool and quiet, right?
Absolutely. And that's kind of the biggest consideration on my side, right? So if I had to deal with high temperatures and fans that are spinning at, you know, very high RPMs, then, you know, obviously I would reach for the larger card, right? But I think in this case, it's cooled so well, and it sounds like it's going to be extremely quiet as well. It's just, for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yep. Fantastic. So I think last but not least, Jake, we've got the ROG STRIX card, right? So we've got the, you know, the flagship, right? For those that, of course, are looking to, you know, really have, of course, you know, a lot of ROG users. We personally were biased, but we think ROG are the most passionate and the best PC and DIY hardware enthusiasts that exist in the community. You know,
it's in my name.
You really will only find ROG users that have systems like this, right? That literally from top to bottom, they embrace the performance, the innovation, the quality, and the design of what we do when it comes to the Republic of Gamers series products, right? And so being that, you know, still a 4070 is still a very performant card. Keep in mind, some people do wonder about that, is like you won't see an ROG graphics card for every single model that NVIDIA produces. And part of that is just we want to be able to maintain a pure performance level expectation when you buy an ROG product. you're going to get a certain level of performance from it. And so we still classify this 4070. Hey, this is a really performant card. You know, so it's going to be pair well, especially if you want to consider something like our, you know, high refresh rate, 1440p ROG monitor, maybe an OLED, right? Or are you Team LCD? Which one are you? In the chat, let us know. Team OLED, Team LCD. I think I'm still a little bit Team LCD because I use my monitor for everything, not just purely gaming. But, you know, if you've got the budget, it's about both of them, Team OLED and Team LCD. But let's go ahead and take a look at this card here, the ROG STRIX.
Actually, before we get quite into the STRIX, I want to address one of the questions from Quacked Out. So he's asking, as cards become more powerful, will we start putting thicker fans on them rather than larger heat sinks? And JJ, you may be able to touch on this a little bit better, but I know that there is, within a certain size form factor, without just making, you know, an 8-slot tall card, there is a trade-off between larger fans versus the heat sink. It's how much heat can the heat sink dissipate, and how much can the fans pull the heat from the heat sink. So there's a lot of R&D that goes into balancing and optimizing the size of each of those. And so while you can see like some of the new 30 millimeter thick fans may cool better than say 25 millimeter, that's 5 millimeters that you're losing of the capability of the heat sink. So even if the fans can pull it away faster or quieter, you may still result in overall higher temps. So there's a lot more that goes into it than just, you know, thicker fans make it better, if you are not considering, or if you are considering the size limitations and trying to still keep the card able to fit in most chassis.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that influence thermal design. A great example is, you know, the co-work that we did with Noctua, right? Where because you actually had a larger diameter fan, we actually had to readjust the entire heatsink topology and layout dimensions so that we could actually take advantage of the increased diameter, right? And also have a more optimized what's called fin stack, right? Where you want to make it more dense. So as that static pressure is coming in, you essentially are helping to maximize its cooling performance. So that's something that we have to evaluate every generation. But if we look kind of generation to generation, this is actually something that's already happened. The Axial-Tech fans actually got bigger in the last couple of generations. We went to larger diameters. We added the ring barrier based design to help to focus even more airflow. We actually went to more rigid based materials to, again, be able to maximize performance, reduce turbulence, right? So there's a lot of things that kind of go into the design. But I think, you know, to not overcomplicate it, it's, you know, it's just we try to look at this holistically every generation, right? We try to mix that balance in terms of hitting the right targets, right? Because at the end of the day, what you care about is that those temperatures are reasonable or hopefully cool, and you care that it's not going to be loud and it's going to be quiet, right, when you're gaming. And so that's, again, the goal is to be cool and to be quiet. And definitely, regardless of which card you get here, that's the great thing is it doesn't matter. It's none of these are going to be in a situation like, it's still a good card, but it's going to be kind of hot and it's going to be kind of loud. It's still going to be performant. It doesn't matter here. It's just really going to come down to do you want some of those supplemental features? Do you want maybe some of the more premium materials? Do you want more RGB lighting? You know, what are you going to be looking for? And you know, with ROG STRIX, you know, rounding out here that conversation, it's going to be about trying to give you really the best of the best. So this card is going to be ultra premium across the board. So we'll feature our most robust PCB design, the most robust VRM component design, the highest performing thermal solution. Just like the TUF gaming model, this is going to be full metal. It has, of course, the most RGB lighting, where you have one zone right here. And then you have this really, really distinct 360-degree tail light design that we implemented, which goes around the entire perimeter of the card. It has a really distinct and cool kind of effect once it's in there. I'll show you guys a picture of how it looks in a system, because it looks entirely different once it's actually also inside of a system. And you also even get some premium things. Like if we look here on the rear of the card, you'll see that it actually has even 2 fan headers. So we actually call Fan Connect 2. It's the technology that's on this card. So that means that if you want to have like supplemental fans connected and maybe you run out of fan headers on the motherboard, or the cool kind of little trick that this implementation offers is these fans respond immediately to the GPU temperature. So most fans in your system respond to the CPU temperature, but the benefit of this design is you can actually have them respond to the GPU temperature. So the moment that you're kicking on, I'm jumping into finals, or I'm jumping into Cyberpunk, or I'm jumping into, you know, whatever game it is that you're playing, those fans are going to be in alignment to ramp up, because sometimes there can be a delay. Sometimes your CPU you know, it could be sitting at a certain temp, especially under gaming. Generally, it depends on your CPU, but the GPU probably will be running at a higher temperature point than your CPU. So having your fans actually always respond to your CPU temperature isn't actually always, let's say, the most sensible thing when you want to talk about intake airflow. So that is going to be a cool element. We don't yet have all the specifications to give you guys. The Strix card will be coming out a little bit later, but we want to give you just that heads up. Hey, people always ask us, are you going to have a Strix card? So again, if you do want that flagship card, we will have a Strix model that will be coming out. And lastly, here, just to,
there, right?
to show you guys here again, kind of look what a pairing might look like if you were to pair maybe some of these boards together from an aesthetic perspective, and also kind of positioning. Again, the white pairs really, really well with our Prime series. I didn't put the ROG Strix-A, but the ROG Strix-A is also our white silver themed ROG motherboard. I think it would also perfectly fit there. And that model, we do have DDR4 based variant motherboards too. So I think it aligns with that goal on NVIDIA's side to be able to offer a card that is, you know, performant, but at a lower price point. Kind of very much aligns with what we're doing with the Prime series and the ROG Strix-A series, giving you value, giving you a really nice aesthetic choice as well. ROG Strix makes sense. Pair it with an ROG Strix board. It's going to look fantastic, right? It's going to go hand in hand with each other in terms of the ID design. Here, I threw a little bit of an alternate one. Michael, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about, you know, NVIDIA Studio drivers, creators, and how this could, I think, be a really great card for creators when we talk about its performance, its efficiency, the modern media engine support. So why not pair it with something like our ProArt series? Our ProArt series, it's a great platform that we offer here. Again, here I actually put our B series because, you know, maybe you don't need any overclocking support, right? You just want something that's going to be stable, reliable, turnkey, put it all together and be able to have a great system that looks good. I think the dual with something like a ProArt board would be a fantastic choice. And then lastly, TUF Gaming, right? So TUF Gaming, of course, could equally pair up here with a TUF Gaming based motherboard. And again, these are just rules. These are not hard rules. You could pair any card you want with any of them. They're all physically interoperable. They're all just PCI Express. If you want to put a TUF Gaming card on an ROG Strix motherboard or a Prime motherboard, go to town. There's no limitations in that regard. These are just some visual reinforcement cues that we do to help to show kind of the breadth and depth of what we do to offer you, I think, a really nice, clean design aesthetic. And I'd love to know everybody's thoughts in the group. If you were to go with which pairing would you go with? With that, Jake, what else do we want to jump into here?
Well, first off, the Prime White series is the best, and anyone who says anything else in chat is wrong. So there's that. Well, I think that covers the bulk of the new cards that we have launched, at least for the time being. Michael, do you have anything else you'd like to add for us before we maybe open it up for like a quick and brief Q&A to see if there's any questions we missed?
I don't think so. You know, we had a chance to talk about DLSS 3. We had a chance to talk a little bit about NVIDIA Reflex, a little bit about the media engine. You know, the use cases just beyond gaming with NVIDIA Studio and some of the applications that can really take advantage of our hardware there. So I think we really captured everything that I wanted to share. You know, obviously we also captured, you know, that there's a lot of people using our technologies, right? It's not just, you know, we don't just make these for no one to use, right? A lot of people are using DLSS and ray tracing. And so it's really exciting to see this, and, you know, and the ease of access to implement these technologies into games is only getting better. And the technologies are obviously getting better every month. So I don't really have anything else to add at this point. So, but thank you.
Very cool. Thank you, Michael. I will say though, if you can maybe give us a little bit of detailing, if you can. I know that there was some discussion regarding some people again that have had this kind of question regarding kind of why we don't see DLSS 3 on older graphics cards. Can you give us maybe a little bit of insight into some of the hardware requirements on why we're only seeing DLSS 3 on a 40 series card?
Absolutely, yeah. So the big reason why is that we have our optical flow accelerator. Now, this is a physical piece of hardware on our GPU itself, right? It is present in our previous generations of RTX SKUs. However, it's not as performant, right? The job that this has during the frame generation component of DLSS 3 is a big one, right? It's a very big job. So it has to essentially analyze 2 frames, has to create an optical flow field, has to take motion data, has to take you know, just game data as a whole, feed it to the AI network, have the tensor cores go ahead and do its job. And it's a lot of work, right? So if we were to enable this on previous generation GPUs, it would not be a great experience. It wouldn't. You would,
and I think the other thing that you kind of nailed
on
on there too, right, is that you said like, hey, it's handing off also other items to tensor cores. And so this is a holistic technology, because you guys didn't just have the improvements of the optical flow accelerator, right? You've got also a new generation of tensor cores, right? So
absolutely,
when you're talking about the performance and the architecture, kind of everything is being bridged together to be able to make sure that they reach that performance and kind of efficacy, right, in terms of what it can achieve.
Absolutely,
and sure, you could maybe kind of get away with trying to do it, but is it going to reach an actual real usable implementation?
Correct.
And that ultimately doesn't, I think, benefit anybody, right? If you unlock something or you give something to it, but it's literally at such a level that they don't realize a consistent benefit from it, because then you can get questions of like, why is it working so slow? Or you guys need to make a better driver, or, you know, different items like that. So thank you for giving us just a little bit of that context and insight to know that there's hardware here that is helping to realize this. And
absolutely.
I think another point that you touched on too is, while we do talk about frame generation, I think sometimes there's a conversation out there that people will kind of elicit and say, you know, it's an entirely kind of a not real frame. But it's really important to know that everything you're seeing is always based modeled off of actual real frame data that is being rendered.
Absolutely.
And that is critical here, right? We're actually talking about the actual game data. So that is dynamic, right? From frame to frame to frame to frame, that's consistently being essentially referenced and then actually being generated from that point. So you're always working with real, true data.
Right? Correct. Yeah. And it's in, you know, to that point, you know, it might not be a frame generated in a traditional way, but it's still a real frame, even though it's generated by the AI itself, right?
Correct. Yep. Correct. Very cool. Okay. So I think that wraps up everything from our side. We can see, like you said, Jake, if maybe we got some questions. I do want to make this a quick, you know, touch point here. We've talked a little bit about how some of the cards, of course, have traditional legacy power connections, right? Where you've got your 8-pin PCIe, or you've got models like the ROG STRIX that do have the 12-volt high power. Do keep in mind, guys, that we do have a full lineup of power supplies that we have recently launched. So everything from the SFXL, which will get you taken care of again on the legacy side, or with native 12-volt high power. This is an ATX 3.0 spec. We just launched the TUF Gaming ATX 3.0 base PSUs. We'll have the ROG STRIX model probably coming out maybe next month time frame. And then we are currently have our ROG Thor series, which, while they're ATX 2.0 are our flagship series product, and are also do come included in the box with the 12-volt high power adapter cable. So regardless, it doesn't matter which power supply you go with, they're all going to be able to give you the power that you're going to need for your system, and fully compatible with the entire range of our NB40 series products. So it doesn't matter, 4070, 4070 Ti, 4080, 4090, doesn't matter. Go to town. You're going to be good to go. Jake, why don't we see what we got in terms of some questions?
Well, we do have a couple things to do real quick, and then we'll finish with a short Q&A. Is first off, for some of those who may be wanting something a little bit more powerful than the 4070s, we do currently have promos going on for the 4080s. For example, the TUF is $80 off on Amazon right now. But in addition to whether you, yeah, so in addition to that, whether you get, say, the 4070, the 4070 Ti, 4080, or 4090, NVIDIA also has a bundle going on for the Overwatch 2 Ultimate Battle Pass. So you'll get a game and a game, basically. So definitely something, if you're in the market right now, make sure you take advantage of that bundle and, you know, get your free battle pass. And if you're going to buy a 4080 or something, use the extra money, get yourself another game, or put it towards like a nice G-Sync monitor upgrade. Always good choices there. And then in addition to that exciting news, we will go ahead and give you guys the second code for the stream. So again, make sure that you guys have joined the Gleam giveaway so that you can also get a white dual card, which is the best model. That's not ASUS's designation, that's personal. I think I need to make that clear for legal reasons. And I will share the second code in the chat in just a second as well.
Ooh, there we go. All right.
There we go.
And is this one is this for another dual card? Or for the TUF gaming
Nope,
card?
all for the same one.
Okay.
All for the
There we go.
same
Just
white.
so everybody's clear, because we got different codes here. Just make sure. This is going to be for your dual card, and this is going to be for the white card, right?
Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah,
right.
the Gleam giveaway that we're running right now is, again, for anyone who's maybe joined a little bit late, is for the ASUS RTX 4070 Dual, the white edition that we have.
This beautiful card right here, guys. Cool, quiet, fast, and compact.
Mm-hmm.
2.5 slot.
Yeah, it is a beautiful card, hands down.
Are you getting tempted, Michael? Are you getting tempted to build a white themed build?
Don't sway me, JJ. Don't sway me.
So I think we've got I think it's a good time for a few questions. So Kevin, I think you actually asked this earlier, and I hadn't addressed it at the time because I felt going through the stream we would kind of talk about it a little bit, but some of the cards are higher, but like if you look at like our TUF model and stuff, we're offering you a lot higher overclocking, or I shouldn't say a lot of higher overclocking. We're offering you the higher base clock speeds. We're offering you the increased cooling, and then as JJ mentioned while we were talking about it, you've got a metal shroud and things like that. There's a lot that goes into the new models. DLSS 3, you've got frame generation. It's ever improving technology, ever improving manufacturing, and ever changing design and everything like that. So there's a lot that goes into these cards, and hopefully, having watched through the stream, you will have seen where a lot of that value comes from. And then I think, as Michael showed in the slides, that a lot of these cards these days for the performance are offering better value than prior generations.
Yeah, I think a key part that you also want to look at, right, is that, value from that performance perspective, it's always encompassing the totality of what is being offered to you, right? And so if you want to look at only kind of things in one limited budget, one limited kind of perspective, that is going to be limiting the value arc that you can essentially benefit from the card, right? And this is where it makes sense to take advantage of these technologies, right? So, being able to, like I said, toggle on, DLSS and RTX and see the performance benefits, even if you compare that to something like a prior generation, like a 30 series card, you could still see huge performance uplifts, and that is going to add that additional value proposition. And again, there are going to be clear items where, like I said, hey, 30 series was great, but you didn't have AV1 encoding support, right? So you're now bringing that to the table, right? So, and I think the other part that we talked about in the very beginning, right, is that most users don't upgrade generation to generation. Most users are actually 3, 4, 5 years apart. So I think for a lot of these users that are probably looking for an upgrade, the upgrade experience that you're going to be getting, it's actually even really hard to metric, because even from a review perspective, you might not easily find these comparisons, right? Like, hey, can I see what, I got a 1070. How much of a performance uplift am I getting in here, right? And that's just talking about pure gaming performance. We're not even talking about all the other things. It could be much cooler, it could be much quieter, you could be getting better, lower power consumption, right?
Yeah, we've got another question as well. What resolution is the 4070 aiming at? I mean, today this is going to be heavily dependent on what you're playing. If you're playing Minecraft, okay, cool, you run it at 4K. Are you playing, Counter-Strike 2 when it comes out? TBD on what performance is, but if it's anything like prior, Counter-Strike games, expect high frame rates across the board, and is probably likely to be 4K. Esports, you are going to be targeting the high refresh 1080p there that a lot of people go towards. 1440p, you're going to have, depending on the game, ray tracing capability, even, especially with, again, DLSS 3 making a lot of this even easier to run. And that's not one of those, I guess you can answer is what is it aiming at? Like the 4090 can run anything at anything, essentially. So of course you can call it just a straight 4K gaming card, but while the 4070 may not do,
what you're trying to nail down, right, is at the end of the day, right, what we always tell users is the game and your image quality and your resolution, right? Which one of those three, and all three of those impart a huge effect in terms of the gameplay experience, right? So, you could easily go, hey, Doom Eternal, you could be talking about, 160 frames a second on this card in raster performance at 4K, right? But at the same time, you know, you jump into, you know, God of War, you jump into The Witcher, you jump into Death Stranding, right? Assassin's Creed Valhalla, this is going to be different, right? Different game engines. But I would say, you know, overall on average, even from a raster level, you are talking about a card that can comfortably be looking at a wide number of games at what I consider the benchmark for performance, which is going to be 60 frames. It's actually going to be over that, I think, as a relative average. So you can feel comfortable and confident that a wide range of those, and especially if you start to get into games which are maybe a little bit older, less demanding, you can toggle around the image quality settings. Like I noted with Doom Eternal, you could easily be seeing double that. And then you add in stuff like DLSS to some of these games. You know, you could also, again, that's the great thing about these technologies. You can toggle it on and all of a sudden go from maybe having something that is pretty playable to now all of a sudden clearly playable and really enjoying the gameplay experience.
Yeah. And to kind of add to that, you know, this card is targeted at a 1440p high refresh rate experience, right? And that includes ray tracing, right? Whether it's using DLSS super resolution or DLSS 3 with frame generation, right? So, you know, there's many games, there's many reviews out there that kind of can show that as well. But 1440p is the target. Can you game at 4K with it? Absolutely, you know, but it is more geared towards that 60 FPS type experience at 4K. And then to Jake's point, you know, if you were on a 1080p super high refresh rate monitor, this is a great option as well.
Yeah, and I think this also comes in alignment with even, you know, us being really kind of the premier kind of gaming monitor manufacturer out there too. It's very much in alignment with where we see the trajectory, right? So, you know, we now have 1440p even high refresh rate monitors starting at about like almost $250 for, you know, 1440p 170 hertz. And that's really kind of in this exact kind of spot of where you want to be, right? When you're talking about this kind of 165-ish to about like a 240 hertz 1440p experience. This is going to be that perfect pairing. So if you haven't made that jump up yet to maybe like 1440p high refresh rate, this is a really good combination. Or like you said, if maybe you're a little bit more into that competitive gameplay environment, you know, CSGO, Valorant, Overwatch, Rainbow Six Siege, things along those lines, hey, you could even be jumping into higher performance, right, with ultra high refresh rate 1080p.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. And I mean, we showed off not too long ago, what was it, like 500 hertz 1080p? I forget the exact definition. I think it was like 500 or a little over that. And so you're talking about blazing fast, like the ultra high doesn't even start to really describe it because even 360 was ultra high refresh. So now you're looking at just insane speeds for 1080p. And
yeah, I pretty much just classify ultra being everything after 240 because, you know, we've got 280, we've got 360, we're going to have 540, and we're on the journey to 1,000 hertz. But our friends over at NVIDIA, I'm sure, are going to continue to help us be able to reach those targets. So we're excited about that for whenever they end up coming. I think, you know, this question here in terms of bottleneck, this is always a really tricky one. And it's one I tell actually gamers that I think that they stress about too much. To be honest, your CPU definitely plays a part, and you can be limiting the performance. But the reality is, you know, we get people sometimes go like, "Hey, I don't have a 3900K. I've got, you know, I've got a 10600K. Right? Is that still going to be fine if I upgrade?" And what I always try to tell people is, look, if you look at your performance benchmarks that you might see online, or you might see the information that might be noted from NVIDIA, you might not see that peak level of performance, but it doesn't undercut the fact that you're still making a huge uplift in the performance. So you might be maybe only realizing, you know, 80% or 85% of the performance of effective, let's say 100% peak performance, right? There could also be some other sometimes variations in maybe frame times or some subtle things like that. But usually you can balance those things out with your settings and taking advantage of things like the GeForce experience, where you could optimize for performance or you can optimize for quality. And this is also actually an argument of why DLSS makes a lot of sense, because you can limit some of that CPU conversation. You can help to stabilize the actual gameplay experience where we know we're being actually limited by the CPU. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that, as long as I think you have a fairly modern system. And I classify modern being, you know, probably at the upper limit. So i7, a category for like 8th gen or 9th gen Intel or kind of comparable AMD CPU side. If you're in that class, I would say you still should be entirely fine considering upgrading to something like a 4070. And the higher end you are in that, whether you're in 10th, 11th, of course, 12th gen, it's like it doesn't even matter, right? You're definitely in that part category. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, the whole bottlenecking, you know, it's more or less a balancing act, right? You know, there's some things that are out of your control when it comes to game engines themselves, right? And open world games, and sometimes they're just inherently bottlenecked sometimes by the CPU. To the point we were talking about DLSS 3, right, where if you are CPU bound, let's say you're playing Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you're seeing maybe a max FPS or an average FPS of around like 60 FPS, but you have a high refresh rate monitor. If you are CPU bound, it doesn't really matter how much GPU you throw at that scenario, your frame rate is not going to change, right? So you have to find other ways. You either upgrade your system with a faster CPU and high frequency memory, or you enable a feature like DLSS 3 where it can kind of circumvent that CPU bound scenario and give you additional smoothness through frame generation. So definitely there's different ways to approach it, but if the feature is already tied to your card, it's a simple toggle and you'll get a great experience.
Yep. There you go. And again, I always give a plug back there to I think one of the best features, and still it's one that sometimes gets overlooked, but I really love the GeForce Experience option for a lot of people that aren't always as familiar with a lot of image quality settings too. You guys do a lot of back-end work, to be evaluating games, settings, and being able to give users this easy option that, hey, again, if you want to prioritize towards frame rate and really having those low frame times, the best quote unquote, smoothness gaming experience, go this route. And if you care a little bit more about eye candy, or maybe you're in a game environment where, Twitch response mechanics are not going to be as important, you can go the other direction, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Let me see if we got maybe one or two more, and we'll get ready to wrap things up here. Jake, anything else that you were seeing there?
We got one, and this is maybe a little bit broader of a subject than what we would have time for to discuss within the stream. But I will say that for all of the model series, we are planning to do some rough build guides. Keep in mind that you always want to tailor to exactly what you're needing. But we will be doing like a 4070, 4070 Ti, 4080, and 4090 build guide that will give you like a fairly decent starting point and what to expect from a system with those hardware specs. So just stay tuned to our channel. Those will go up on our YouTube. The 4070 will come first, and we hope to have the first part of that build guide up within the next month or so once we finish filming and everything.
Yeah, you can also make sure to join us in our ASUS PC DIY group. We have an amazing community over close to almost 45,000 members that are all PC DIY enthusiasts that we talk about this, and we give consistent guidance there. I'll tell you from kind of a base level, you kind of saw a little bit when I gave you the motherboard pairings there. I think the sweet spot, if you are going to probably be considering building a system, is this is a great kind of GPU from its price point, right, at $600, to be pairing with a really nice balance. So you don't have to be looking at something like even an i7 or like an i9. I think you can look at something like a 12400, 13400, 12600 is right now still available and seeing really, really great pricing to where you also can overclock that if you want even a little bit more margin. As always, keep in mind, overclocking does void your CPU warranty, but if you want that additional kind of performance, it's there. It's on tap with being a K part if you don't want to go with a locked part like the 12 or the 13400. And then similarly, B series chipset should be a good segue, right? Look at B660, B760, or I think some of those entry options that we talked about on the Z790, right, where you've got like the Dash A, and balancing that out, I think, is a really great foundation for a very performant system. And keep in mind too, right, from the board side, it's not going to affect the performance. Whether you go with like a Maxus motherboard or whether you go with a Prime Dash A, the effective performance you're getting from this GPU is going to be parity. Again, also, while we're focusing here on NV card solutions from the chipset side, if you want to build an AMD-based platform, an AMD CPU, an AMD-based motherboard, these products are fully interoperable, compatible. There's no compatibility issues in that regard, so you're entirely fine in that respect as well.
Yeah, we have I think just one more question I've seen pop up. What are the like PSG requirements for this? And again, this will kind of be dependent a little bit upon what other hardware you have in the system, but I believe it's 850 watt that is sitting as the recommended.
It's actually 650 watts.
It's quite a bit lower than that
watts.
From the efficiency envelope. 650 actually is really, I think, your kind of your baseline requirement. You could probably actually get away with even, I think, actually a 550, but I think 650 is the base. On NVIDIA's technical side, I know, what is your guys' official?
It is 650 watts, yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. When we consider relative kind of power envelope that we see for most users, their realistic power envelope total system power draw tends to be usually about 350 to about 450 watts. Of course, when you get into heavy RGB systems and overclock, you can definitely get into 600, 700, 800 watts. And accordingly, you would want to have a bigger power budget and power supply. But if you're just looking for a choice, like right now, again, you're building, you could have confidence if you want to build a 4070 system, you're entirely fine to buy 650 or 750. I think 750 is my recommendation. Like our TUF gaming power supplies that we just launched, those new ATX 3.0, they start off at 750. And I think that's a good, kind of just gives you a little bit more buffer, or that classic 850 recommendation. Again, I don't think it's going to be going away anywhere anytime soon, especially with the efficiency of what Ada Lovelace offers. Again, an 850 would still even give you the ability, if later you wanted to jump into a 4080, it still is entirely fine. You don't have to be like, because I didn't buy an 1000 watt, that it's not going to be enough to power it. Yeah, and again, if we to clarify for anybody that missed that also as well, the power connector differences, the TUF Gaming and the dual cards feature your standard 8-pin PCI Express power connectors, and then on the ROG STRIX card, those feature the 12-volt high power connector, right? Yeah, definitely sounds very reasonable relative for the power supply requirements. Yeah, and again, efficiency, I think, Mike, what you were saying, real like nominal gaming workload, it's actually under 200 watts, like 185 watts or something like that.
Yeah, about 186 watts, yeah, is what we're seeing on our end.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, unless we have any last questions there, I think that gets ready to wrap up our stream. It's been actually fantastic having you join us here, Michael. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of time, giving us a little bit of perspective at all the work NVIDIA is doing, and excited to be able to offer, I think, this new mid-range based offering, right? That actually is, I think, punching above its weight. You know, a lot of times in the past, even not that long ago, when we talked about mid-range, I don't think that we were talking about ultra high refresh rate gaming, right? 1440p, or being able to talk about playing a game, you know, with something like DLSS at 4K, right? That's pretty awesome. Plus a lot of those other features. If you guys, of course, have any other questions, comments, feedback, feel free to go ahead and check out the links that we have in the chat. If you guys are watching us on demand, check out the description. You can go ahead and check out our corresponding product pages. If you want general information regarding NVIDIA, feel free to go ahead and check out the, of course, the NVIDIA website. You can find out more from ASUS in our ASUS PCDIO group, as well as our ASUS product pages for our respective models, whether it's the dual, TUF Gaming, or the ROG STRIX series. As always, too, don't forget to check us out on our social channels, right? Whether it's going to be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever it might be. We've probably got a space for you to be able to get the content that you're looking for. So that should cover us on that side. Any last words from you, Jake?
No, thank you everyone so much for joining us for this. Again, don't forget to go enter the giveaway and get your chance to win the absolutely beautiful RTX 4070 Dual White. And also thank you so much to you, Michael, for joining us and helping answer some questions and shed some light on all the new cool and fun gear that's just launched.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys, for inviting me to the stream, and good luck to everybody. I hope someone really appreciates that card. It's a beautiful card. So again, good luck.
All right, guys, take care. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your day, and best of luck with your builds.